Hey, good morning. Hi, I'm Warren Whitlock. I'm here with this session as I've been told, we're talking about smart contracts, and the business application of blockchain in general, which is like my favorite subject in the whole world. So I'm glad to be here. I've got some things I know I want to share, and I've also just met James Reagan, and wave and say hi, James. Let us all know you're here.
Yeah, hi, I'm James Regenor, the CEO of Veritex, and
Ah,
I'm going to speak after Warren, and then we'll start distilling down some use cases for blockchain and business, and we'll leave some time at the end for your questions. Go ahead, Warren.
sure. I'll start off with a little bit of a history of where I'm coming from. I think I got into blockchain because of I'd heard about Bitcoin and whatnot in 2009, and most of the world ignored it and went on about our business. And I had a friend, Michael Turpin, who's now the one of the big names in having had success and also doing public relations and things like that. So we talked about it some, and I said, "Listen, I'm not up for this mining thing." And so why don't we talk about what really could happen? He's going like, "Yeah, you don't have to be a miner." And in 2012 or whenever that happened, I'm going like, "Oh, good." So it's interesting. I was working on a book called um, uh, "A Billion's Rising" and talking about how the people making less than $2 a day were anxious to get a hand up, but not necessarily a hand out, and self-reliance and the model of what we look at in startups and entrepreneurs. And that's how people feel all over the world. They want to have a better life for them and their family, and they're willing to work for it. And the cool thing about blockchain was a fintech application at the time, was transferring money without the usurious fees that happen with wires. I mean, back in the day, if you had to put money in, or instructions or contract or anything, wanted to get across the country, maybe you had Pony Express or a train or something like that, then quite a bit of cost in actually transporting information. That's gone today. There is no cost, and blockchain and cryptocurrencies allow that to be instant, which means we open up a global market. So over the years, I've been focused on looking for ways to reduce friction in supply chains and in everything we do. And I keep coming back to blockchain being something to do. Thanks to the ICO craze, I got a whole lot of requests to do my normal business type consulting to small businesses that were starting up with an ICO. And we know what problems came there. That's what got me interested in Wyoming as the sanest place in the United States for me. And so I've been following what's going on here, and that led me to all sorts of other things. I now have a podcast called Distributed Conversation, because I believe the future of the world is not centralized; it's decentralized. It's all of us having our nodes of influence, and I think we're just getting started. I have studied a lot about smart contracts. I don't say I'm an expert by any means, and that's why I'm so pleased to be here today with James. What do you
All right,
Go ahead, James?
is that your handoff? Great. All right. So I much appreciate it, Warren, and thanks everybody. This virtual setup is interesting. If you got questions, it looks like there's a chat feature down here. Just pop them into the chat, and Warren and I will get to them when I'm done. So Warren really he really hit kind of the essence of what I'd like to speak about, and it's really about the decentralization of X. You can pick the X. Right now, there's a big craze going on with DeFi, decentralization of finance. You see over 4 billion in liquidity that's been created here in the last couple of weeks with DeFi. And you also see large banks now moving to take some of what I'll say best use cases for DeFi and apply them for their customers. So my kind of take on all this is really about decentralized manufacturing. To me, that's the real use case for blockchain. And I'd like to tell you kind of how I arrived at that. I had spent 31 years in the Air Force. In my last Air Force command, I led an organization that was 15 locations, 11 countries across 3 continents, doing about 60,000 maintenance touches a year. I was a pilot, but I was leading this maintenance organization. Through that, I was always starving for spare parts. So when I left, I looked for a way to kind of solve that problem. How can we increase mission capable rates, keep airplanes flying? What technology convergences were available? And we had acquired, I was working for a company called Moog. It was a tier one supplier. We acquired a 3D print business. And I said, 3D printing will be commoditized, but really it serves as an enabler for something else. What's that something? So I kept searching for the what's what. And out of that, we did some scenario-based planning. The first was you're on an aircraft carrier, you're in the Indian Ocean, sea state level 3. You got a F-18 that has to fly a mission, lives are at stake, you have a 3D printer. How could you send a part direct from an OEM, an equipment manufacturer, straight to that printer? They could print it knowing that the data was not corrupted, knowing that the processes that were required to be followed were followed, and knowing that the performance inside the printer was actually what it was supposed to be. So we called that the 3 integrities. And we said, how can we now solve for these 3 integrities? Standing on that aircraft carrier and looking backwards, so in other words, doing a right to left methodology, we quickly distilled down to it was about trust. Now, this is November 2015. Most of the blockchain was still more to crypto. There wasn't a lot of discussion. But we had a colleague at MIT that said, hey, why don't you look at blockchain? So I did what everybody does. I jumped in Wikipedia and said, what's blockchain? Then I live in Buffalo, so I got in my car, drove up, and talked to Don Tapscott. He explained to me what blockchain was. And then I drove over to MIT and spoke to Michael Casey. He runs CoinDesk now, I believe, the chief content officer. And before that, he was at MIT. He's written several books, but around crypto and what the world looks like. But out of that, both of those guys said, hey, that's a great use case. And quite frankly, it could change the world because it's got application across many market verticals. So out of that, and we launched a company. I left the company I was at Moog. We created some IP around marrying up blockchain provenance with 3D print build files to create digital assets. And then you could push those digital assets to the point of use and manufacture at the time of need. So in reality, what we did was we created a new modality of logistics. No longer did you have to ship things by truck, train, or plane. You could now push them through the cloud, much like in the consumer space where you consume music and videos on your phone and apps. But you could push that now to a printer and then print at the point of use. And out of that came the company that I'm the CEO of today, which is called Veritex. So we are using Veritex for many, many different applications through different verticals. Most recently during COVID, we opened our aperture to the medical supply chain. We went from, started a new company under Veritex called Rapid Medical Parts, started a new company, filed a patent around a new ventilator design specifically for digital manufacturing, where we reduced the number of parts. Typical ventilator 700, we've got 40 with a very broad operating envelope, but we reduced that and got a DoD contract, and we did all that in 12 days. We just finished up the DoD contract, and now we're back to running the medical side and the aerospace side. But how are we using blockchain smart contracts? We're using smart contracts to create digital workflow. We're securing that digital workflow with SSI, self-sovereign identification. We're using blockchain for KYC, know your customer, and the AML aspects. We're also, when we convert the part from a digital asset to a physical part, we're tokenizing that part to create a digital twin that we can now follow through the full product lifecycle. That's extremely important because we're now creating aggregatable data sets that didn't exist before that we can use for predictive and prescriptive maintenance models. And again, we're focused on uptime. But where's the value at? The value is we're able to decrease long lead times. The typical wait for the Air Force to get a forging or casting done is 87 weeks. And then on top of that, another 4 to 6 months before they get a final part. We were able with our process to take F-15 parts and reduce the lead time from 265 days down to 6 hours. And that was order to delivery at the point of need. We're also using blockchain to data rights manage those files so that OEMs know that their files not pushed out into some Napster environment and it's proliferated. So kind of our secret sauce in Veritex is how we data rights manage. And then on top of that, we're using the security of SSI and key pair so that you can actually create a more secure system that is required by regulation for ITARs and export control. But out of that, we've created really this new business that allows companies now to interact peer-to-peer, takes out a lot of the arbitrage that exists, takes the non-value added costs out of supply chain, warehousing, inventory management, transportation, and that sort of stuff. But most importantly, it shifts the operating margins of the buy and sell side. So if you're a seller of a part, you're no longer burdened with the task or the cost of raw materials and the cost of manufacturing, and your cost of goods sold go down. So your margin, your operating margin can go up. Typical industrial companies run in the band of 9 to 15% operating margin if they're really good. Digital companies start in the mid 30s, work their way up into the 70s. On the buy side, again, those non-value added costs aren't there, but the cost of manufacturing, cost of raw materials happens at the time of use, so it's consumed. So it's not riding on your balance sheet, so you don't have that downdraft. Companies try to take SG&A, which is their admin costs, and their inventory costs off the balance sheet as quick as possible because it's a tough downdraft. But so that's the ecosystem we've built. We've got 27 ecosystem partners. So think about, we've created a B2B Amazon marketplace. And when folks who don't know much about the space kind of ask me, hey, explain it a little bit clearer for me, I say simply like this. Compare snail mail to email today. How many people have to touch a snail mail, a regular piece of mail that you drop in a post box before it gets to you? How many opportunities is it there for that to be compromised? How many opportunities for that to just go in the wrong direction? As opposed to if I send Warren an email, it goes direct to him with certainty right now. So you can take all those steps out. I'll pause there and push back over to Warren a little bit for some comments, and we can go back and forth from there. If you've got questions, trying to figure out how to deal with them, put them in. We can hear them. Warren, we're not hearing you. I think you're muted.
Looks like I got muted somehow. So great. Hey, good to be back with you. No, I'm making notes here of several directions to go with this. I mean, number one being you're talking about the same kind of system that makes putting a 3D printer on the space shuttle work. You can't make a trip to Mars now, even contemplated without a 3D printer. So
we actually
we're getting really close to replicator.
Yeah. No. So Warren, we actually have our patents are actually extended into space. So if you're going to make something in a spaceship, space colonies, space factory, you're going to care about data, process, and performance integrity.
Right.
We're using AI in the build chamber with convolutional neural networking and so on. So
yeah, going right back to some of the stuff as a hobby read about is what is the universe? Is it DNA? Is it code? Is everything gets down to be data? It's a fascinating idea that really moving stuff around is just a way to get to the point of, hey, self-sufficient. You go out in space, you don't look for a courier to bring something. FedEx is not yet delivering to space shuttles. So in a way you can get some stuff up to the space station, but really that's the model we want to get away from. We want to have, I can decide to build my compound in rural Wyoming and live there. As long as I have good communications with the world and 3D printer, I'm good to go on a lot of things, and that includes food. And then on the food thing, I got thinking about I just interviewed someone about ag tech and what he's working on, and yeah, it's all data again. He knows, before a disease hits a shrimp pond in Asia, his data is predicting that it's going to happen, and they can take remedial measures without losing the shrimp. And then basically that follows all the way through to the restaurant serving it to the individual consumers. It's the whole farm to table thing, which is the best way to fix a supply chain is to eliminate having to move the parts. So,
so Don Tapscott likes to say the best antiseptic is a little sunlight. So by being able to open up and giving visibility to that supply chain, in your example, that shrimp market, track and trace is one thing. It comes kind of just by default with blockchain, right? So it's what can you do, and it's really, for me, it's about that data generation, as you just said. If you look at really why Amazon and Google are so profitable, it's not for the things they sell, it's for the data they glean and the insight, right? And that information flow. That's what really makes a difference. So we're going to pack that into now an ecosystem that today is paper. I was a pilot for 25 years. When I used to fly a plane down to get depot level maintenance, I used to carry a 200-pound accordion file of everything
Right.
that happened in that plane. If that paper was lost, that plane's a paperweight. You can't fly
Right.
it. It's done. You know.
Yep. Yeah. Well, wow. I just had an Amazon experience yesterday. I am checking on an order. I don't remember what, and I noticed I bought a new kind of cereal bowl last week. So, and of course I went to Amazon. That's where I shop, but it could have happened anywhere. But, I went there and it said, here's what your recent order is. And I'm going like, really like the cereal bowl. Maybe I ought to get them next time I don't have to wait till next time. I just push a button and a few dollars and, and I now have, 8 cereal bowls instead of 4. Good. When I leave it sitting by the TV and don't wash it, I have another one for tomorrow's cereal. Um, uh,
So what you're doing is you're applying knowledge and intelligence to that situation.
yeah,
The next overlay of what we're starting to see come out right now is providing an AI machine learning layer on top of all that blockchain data that we're
sure.
going to generate, which is what we're doing. We've got 27 partners. One of them is an AI partner, but he's able to look at a supply chain, take Boeing aircraft, 30,000 suppliers, able to look at that and says, okay, what happens if the price of titanium tanks? Or what happens if this company goes out of business? How does it now ripple
Right.
through the supply chain? I mean, so you can get to predictive decision making by in mitigating your risk. Risk actually then becomes mitigation of risk becomes the value, right? By being able to do what you just said. If your shrimp farmer went in there and said, well, what if I get a virus in this pond? How then does it affect my distribution, right? Or how can I
Absolutely.
mitigate that? So now all of a sudden, in the Air Force, when I flew airplanes, we used to do what's called fly to fail. We'd repair a part when it broke.
Right.
But now we want to get to predictive maintenance. So when it's sitting on the ground, maybe getting a new brake or new tire, and you go, you know what? In another 20 hours, this part over here is supposed to be replaced. Why is it supposed to be replaced? Because I know looking at 1,000 of them that at this hour point is when it's most likely to break. So now you can take it off, right? And then decrease that downtime because really everything we're doing is focused on uptime, whether it's a ship,
Right.
plane, train, whatever, rocket ship, doesn't
Right.
matter.
And actually in the procurement before, that whole channel has all been like, okay, where's the contract, who's making the money, things like that. We really are preparing for a world where the amount of cash changing hands becomes less and less important. It's about whether or not the supply chain works and the uptime is achieved.
Think
Um,
about when you say cash, Warren, think about how much working capital is involved if you have to go print a whole bunch or you have a whole bunch of physical inventory, right? Your
right.
capital is now tied up in inventory. So
Yeah.
you can have a large business and the demand for working capital now decreases if you're just going to make digital assets and move them off balance sheet, right?
Well,
Now,
and we think that the data transfer and the storage of data has gone down to near zero already, and it's just going to continue that trend. I don't see Moore's law wearing out just because the silicon got too small.
yeah.
There's other factors coming in, and so if you look at that, electricity generation is on a declining curve. Really about it, and I'm very interested because that fixes the rest of the world. We often talk in examples of how that Western society, what we're able to do. But when you talk about somebody has nothing, and we're going to get to the point of being able to help them get whatever they need and leapfrog, just like cell phones, the mobile technology leapfrog needing to wire a country for phone service. And so as those things become more available to everybody, we all come up, we all do better, and the smart person who was living a life of destitute in a poor country, by randomly being born there, we now can give that person opportunities. And some of the inventions I've seen come out of Africa are just like blow my mind to think that some of these people did not get the education or opportunities that we all take for granted, like running water, and they're solving for problems like that using next to nothing. When you talk about making the equipment, you were talking about the ventilators and the number of parts you reduce, that's probably going to help with the maintenance too. It's like how
Yeah,
many
that's
times have we seen a story of medical equipment being donated to the third world, and it says there's a doorstop because they can't get the part they need.
so we took a whole bunch of parts and conjoined them to make manifolds that were 3D printable.
Right.
So if you're in Timbuktu, which I've been to before, it's the home of the world's largest freestanding mosque, 4
Uh-huh.
stories of cow dung and mud. But you can now get that digital part and, repair it. So we built it with a digital sustainment plan in mind,
Right.
and with to have a very large operating envelope. So to your point, we need to be able to create, in the case of healthcare, high quality healthcare solutions at an affordable cost, and really with a sustainable plan for those regions like sub-Saharan Africa or parts of Asia and so on.
Right.
So that digital commerce really sets the landscape up, and the ability to push across borders. Digital commerce is borderless. I spoke to the deputy administrator of Customs and Border Protection, and I said, "Ma'am, how are you going to, monitor digital commerce?" And she's like, "Oh, Jim, that's easy. We do that every day." I go, "No, ma'am, you monitor e-commerce, where I click on
Right.
something, and the physical item comes through the port of Long Beach. You have a chance to intercept it." But I said, with digital commerce, it moves directly from my computer to the person who bought its computer. I said, there's not a digital port of entry.
Right.
So how will you
It
control
it
that?
really it's becoming a global economy, and we're not here to discuss whether a global government or whatever goes in the future. It doesn't matter because it's going to be decentralized no matter what happens. Not
Right.
going to be able to set up more tariffs and borders and things as the world becomes more one market.
That's
And you even call it a market if it's just human beings helping each other. So
it's but that's it.
take the money out of it, take finance out
Yeah,
of it, and it actually becomes very easy to
yeah.
imagine what you can do.
But
And I'm of the opinion that if I help enough other people get what they want, I'm going to get whatever I need.
yeah,
And I don't need to worry about, can I lock in a profit? Now I'm in the minority of saying those things, but really, I mean, hey, I'm not in the minority. It's what Christ taught. It's what other great prophets and thinkers of all time have thought, that it's what mom told me when she said it's better to give than receive. And
yeah.
I said, yeah, mom, but I want my Christmas present. But
So think,
and I learned that after a while today, it doesn't matter what tie I get for Father's Day. I'm going to be excited that my kid remembered.
yeah.
Not for the tie.
But Warren, think about this, the point you're making. So think about how society developed, and I'll use Europe for an example. You can apply this anywhere because it holds true. But it developed around rivers, right? Because rivers were
Yep.
the source for culture, commerce, and then governments used them for demarcation of different borders. So think about that. So that has been what the model's been for centuries, and even in the U.S., down the Mississippi, the Hudson, the Erie Canal, so on. When you think about now, it's no longer water rivers, but data rivers. So
Right.
if you think in terms of our social, so again, social commerce and government, the social structure now has changed with things like TikTok, Facebook, and so on. So we're able to push across borders and have these relationships on these digital rivers. Commerce has changed with e-commerce and now digital commerce. So these digital rivers are flowing commerce. And now governments are changing. Traditional roles of government is being redefined because we have people issuing money, currency, that are not governments. We have
Mhm.
people that have armies or have hacker groups that are a digital army that that are not state sponsored. So all of a sudden, the traditional roles of government are now being morphed. The reality is society is now being um, redirected, or we're at this societal inflection point based on these digital rivers, as you
Right.
just said. So
I
what
think
does
you're
that look like?
absolutely.
Yeah.
There's Connectography is the name of a book by a friend of mine who's, I'm going to butcher his name if I try to remember it, but um, look me up if you want to know about this. And he basically talked about how in the future, if supply chains and where the energy flows and where the water flows is going to be everything. And he even went out to a future where perhaps global warming has changed the climate to where a different place, when you melt the snow in Siberia, and there's going to be some great agricultural area up there. And as bad as things seem to be for whatever reason, or the world problem, there always going to be some way we get around it. I think the logistics of living through whatever happens sometimes gets put to the side by politics and media wanting to tell us that we need to get back to where we were. Well, I've got one prediction for you. Do not expect to have the pre-COVID world ever there again. It doesn't matter what the markets did and up and down and on that graph. It's a whole different game we're playing now. And I think what that has unlocked is moving us a little bit closer to the rapid abundance we see coming, where, you know, nanotechnology, AI, the 5G and IoT revolution, that's going to make it just a whole lot easier to get good ideas into the hands of helping everyday people, both in, you know, making some money for the Western culture, and then just helping the whole world, which I don't think capitalism is failed. I think capitalism will actually bring it to the point that everybody gets what they want. Then capitalism's got a real problem. We're still a long way from this, but the end of capitalism will be when everybody has so much abundance that we don't need to worry about what's in the bank account. We need to worry about, you know, what we can do to either help people, or what would you do if you didn't have to work anymore? And frankly, you know, I've done okay in life. I can't say that I could just completely retire and lay on a beach, but I don't want to do that. I want to keep going. I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm looking at, you know, what's my career for the next 20, 30 years that I'm alive at the very least. And, stopping doesn't make any sense. But I would like to get to a world where it's not about whether or not I can, you know, trick somebody into paying me for more, which I think every good-hearted person I meet is there. I mean, there's some evil in the world, but people I meet and I interact with are looking to how to get something done. Of course, they want the money. We need funding if we're starting a company. I'm very aware of that part. It's in companies I'm in and advise, but you know, it's like we need to get past that to what's going to be the best we can do to make the world a better place, and blockchain unlocks that. So I did have another question for you, but if you want to comment, go ahead.
All right. I just, what's the likelihood that both of us have read Connectography? So I have. So that's pretty funny.
Oh, okay.
It's not a book that was flying off.
Rock Khan is his name.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's actually sitting on my nightstand. He also talks about, taking a data pipe that's used to 5 billion people and putting 50 billion through it, and mesh webs and these little microwebs and burst transmission stuff. So when you start thinking those terms, it's interesting. Let's kind of we'll turn back into supply chain. What we found during COVID, and some of the lessons learned you're seeing now, is when you saw the medical supply chain start to collapse and these ad hoc supply chains stand up, a lot of people saying, "Oh, great, we have all these ad hoc supply chains," but they were fraught with all kinds of trouble. You lose control of quality. You lose control of counterfeit mitigation. There's a lot of proliferated counterfeit stuff being dumped in the U.S. from others. So now, when you look at kind of what the lessons learned are, at least initially, is you need optionality in supply chain. And moving to a digital supply chain provides that optionality. So if you're able to move digital assets, and let's say you had to move them to Wuhan, China, for some reason, and all of a sudden China closes its borders, and it doesn't mean it closed its digital borders, you can still push it there, but now all of a sudden the factory can't man it. So now you can push into, say you got a factory in Tijuana that does it too, you can now push into Tijuana and just move your digital assets over there. So that optionality is really, really important. Some of the other lessons learned were we need to nearshore, onshore, and really take the rigidity out of supply chains. And I think the last thing people are starting to figure out is, some companies lean themselves too much. There was too much on the lean initiative, and now they're so tight that they don't have optionality of the workforce. They don't have optionality in ideas because of those lean initiatives. So having a little bit of fat when you go into these desperate times, I think is helpful. Having optionality in your supply chain, definitely helpful. And what is creating that optionality is the supply chain schema I talked about with blockchain, provenance, and smart contract, but being able, more importantly, to push peer-to-peer. And I'll pause there.
I hear often about the problem put a lot of different ways, but it really comes down to we hate the people that have the 1% of highest wealth, and well, how can we get more out of them? And we've tried transfer payment. We tried, actually there have been societies that have killed the rich people. So we've tried just about everything. If they go away, the equality doesn't get fixed. It just gets redistributed somewhere else, and others prosper. So I'm not here to solve for that. I'm saying when you look at what you need, that they're right about saying, how much fat do you need? You don't need so much fat that 10 generations from now will still not have spent all the money. You need it, but you need some fat to live on. We do need to profit it's why capitalism works. I mean, it's people trying to do better that way. And you got to have the capital invest. You got to have the seed corn for next season. And I think often in the whatever the ills of corporate America are that they're talking about, it is leaning towards the idea that they've given up on that or gone away from that. And I don't know. I don't want to solve for that problem today. I just want to say that you're absolutely right about what you said about the fat. I did want to get in one more thing about smart contracts and get your take on it, because you seem to be doing quite a bit more in this than the actual implementation than me. So I've read about the change that happened when the world went to double entry bookkeeping some 500 years ago, and how modern commerce wouldn't have worked. We didn't have a way to keep track of inventories and whatnot. And we're now looking at, with smart contracts, it's pre-audited. It's it's triple entry accounting. And you want to speak to that, of what that's going to do to change the world? Or you could say no, I don't want to. But
well, I would just say, I mean, I'll preface everything with it's strictly, it's not an area of expertise for me when I start thinking about it.
Right.
There are plenty of people that are looking at that, and it's part of the DeFi move too. Is really the triple entry though makes a difference. And let's just talk about in terms of from an operational perspective. So I'm working a DoD contract. When I get done with that contract, I have to do a Defense Contract Management Agency audit, which requires manpower. So when we start pushing down through some of the second and third order effects that we can create with smart contracts with these relationships, we can actually start redistributing kind of where the work effort is. Do I need as much of an audit if my record is transparent, right? So if it's already there and it's immutable, then why do I have to audit? Well, we still are going to have to audit because there's a human entry point. There's still humans putting things in, so there could be error, and of course there could be fraud. But beyond that, when you start looking at, if I assign my machine an SSI and I assign the person SSI, so a self-sovereign identification, and then I craft a very specific workflow that then manages through that, we're taking the humanality out of it at some point. So once we do that, where data is actually taken without having been inputted by a human, we're going to change that. So the intersection of IoT, sensor data, and all that really start to lean out what the requirements are going to be in audits. Companies like
it's just pre-audited. It's in a distributed ledger. It's not like somebody can go in at night and change some entries.
Yeah. So if there's a high threat of, for us, when we look at where the best use cases are, high consequence of failure, high threat of litigation, right? So, years ago, like 3 years ago now, Johnson & Johnson had to recall like 20,000 hips. Don't quote me on the number, because they didn't know what the offending hips were, because they had no way to be able to do this reverse forensics. So some of the other second order effects that you get is, you can rapidly go in and say, okay, I need to get all the airplane parts made on this machine, or made by this guy, or made under these atmospheric conditions, or made, you can very quickly do that. Companies spend months on months. I was an accident investigation board president for aircraft accidents, and it takes up to 2 years to issue a final report, because you have to start aggregating through paper and auditing through paper and so on. You can't get some rapid forensics vehicle because that data is not available. So when we start thinking about this, for me, as I look to the future, there's a couple things we have to solve. Interoperability, so being able to move chain to chain. Scalability, which companies like Algorand and Circle here recently announced they can do 1,000 transactions a second on the Algorand platform, which is a big deal. And then looking at the business side, it's behavior modification and value creation, because the world's working today just fine. So if you want people to stop what they're doing and switch into a blockchain schema, you have to create value. That value will then hopefully modify behavior and drive people to use it, right? But if you've already invested, $30 million in SAP ERP system, and I say, hey, I'd like you to try my blockchain system, you're going to go, yeah, what about the 30 million and the maintenance costs and everything else, right? So you have to be able to figure out, how do I create enough value that you, Warren, go, the hell with that ERP system, I'm jumping right here into this blockchain. Sure. That's where we end up.
And when somebody does something better, it's going to, the flow, the capital, whatever, is going to flow that direction, and we're going to be able to see it. We actually can see those kind of things better today, of being able to see what's going on in something. And I think of the example of the automated semi trucks. And a friend who said, you know, this is a couple of years ago. He says, I've been giving this a lot of thought. That's going to change everything. And going like, okay, well, when are they coming? Whatever. He says, that doesn't matter. Sooner or later, Walmart's going to figure out how to go from point A to point B with an automated truck. And then Target has to do it. And then everybody has to do it. And so it will be adopted a lot faster because of that. And I'm thinking like, yeah, we've not thought about things like that before. When something is better, you know, when the iPhone first came out, I waited a year. I had a pretty smart phone. It was working okay. You know, one of the best pieces of hardware I ever had was my last BlackBerry. And I had switched from that to another smartphone, and I'm thinking, great, it's taking pictures. And, you know, and then I got an iPhone, and, you know, because all my friends had an iPhone and were telling me about the nifty app. It didn't take long, but I certainly didn't think that, you know, everyone was going to switch from a flip phone. And there still is a minority of the population that doesn't use a smartphone, but it's grown, and it grew a lot faster than use of phones, accepting radio, TV, you know, every other technology that's come along. Sometimes we can't predict that. I remember, you know, more learning about it than experience. I experienced a little bit of this as a young person. Radio was dead, TV had taken over. And then I had a career in radio, and they're doing just fine now. It's not the same as I want to be. And I could say it's been ruined by modern technology, not making it as essential to have a radio going, but it's still there. And so people just want to use something that absolutely works. And actually, I'm now thinking, just last night, my wife saw somebody in a bunker with a radio, and she said, we need a transistor radio, unless, you know, in case everything else goes out. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll put that on the top of my priority list. But she was right, you know, having backup different technologies is great. And we make those decisions as individuals or as companies that we need to have happen. When something better comes out, you know, I don't think of the power. I remember a wise guy once told me that, you know, keeping a whole bunch of cash, US dollars on your purse, you can go anywhere in the world and get something done. And I go like, yeah, but, you know, the last thing I want to do now is touch cash.
Yeah. So it's interesting you mentioned Walmart. Walmart this week or 2 weeks ago rolled out a news story that they were able to reduce with smart contracts their errors paying truckers down to 0.02%. And they were running before about 80% correct. And so smart contracts has changed that business tremendously. I think we've got 2 minutes left. I just wanted to thank everybody, and I appreciate you taking the time and having the dialogue with me today, Warren.
Yeah, that's great.
Weren't there. So
good. Look forward to us crossing paths again. Thanks everybody for being on the session. Let me see. I don't know whether or not the system gives you contact information, but I'm at warrenwhitlock.com. Why don't you go ahead and give us some URL where people can find you?
Yeah, I'm at Jim at Veritex, VERITX.co. Reach out with any of your questions. Be happy to answer them.
Great. Well, I know I will. Fantastic. So I don't know if we end early, if we kill the program or what, but we got a minute to go. So I don't have any good jokes to tell. So I guess we can just sit here and smile.
I mean, I think, you know, what we're realizing and what you brought up is, you know, we're at this huge inflection point where all these technologies are coming together: blockchain, 3D print, IoT, AI, VR, AR, all those are being slammed together. And it's really changing the speed of business.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you know, that I can sum it up with something I've been saying of late. We're coming into a great acceleration. The 20s will not be known as the COVID decade. Yeah. And from all the other new technologies I've ever been involved with, getting in early, you will do okay in something. You may go join a startup or try to raise some funds for something and it totally falls flat on its face. Doesn't matter. You're working in the right industry. So if you're here if you spent this long talking to us after we already said goodbye a minute ago, take that. You're in the right place. You know, something from the BizCon, the Stampede, whatever you're working on, you're going to lead to a career that's fantastic rather than, you know, deciding, oh, this doesn't work, I need to drive Uber. And you can drive Uber too.
Yep, on more blockchain and crypto, and you open up all kinds of opportunities. Would be my closing thought.
Mhm.
And we're coming back to it. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.